to talk about how to homeschool. A lot of people have their kids home with them all day long and they have to do school and they're just starting from scratch. Others of us have been doing this a really long time, but it's just so nice to talk about it together, to get inspired by each other. So before we get going, we wanted to say what we are not doing and who we are. What we are not doing is being the experts who know everything and are here to tell you how to do it. What we are doing is sharing our experience of 23 and 25 years of homeschooling, what we've done wrong, what we finally figured out, some things that worked for us, and a lot of advice that we've gotten from a lot of wise people. We hang with some very wise friends, as well as read some really good books. So maybe we can save you 25 years. That's what we're hoping.
Well, I actually think she is the expert. She has parented and educated 8 kids now. One of the youngest is 10, the oldest is about to be 24. 3 of them have graduated high school, including me. So I think she's very qualified to talk about this. But I'm here just to give like the kids' perspective, I guess, what it was like growing up homeschooled, and the decisions we made and why and how it worked out.
So we are Christians. We believe that Jesus is real and he came to earth, he died on the cross, he rose again. And that informs everything that we believe and hopefully everything we do. So that's the perspective that you're going to be getting. Let's just jump right in. We've got some questions and we've got some topics that we wanted to cover. And we're going to try to get through a lot, hoping that it'll help somebody out there. You want to start us?
Yes. Okay, so first, Mom, can you tell us about authority and why it's important and how to be a loving authority?
Yeah, God set up homes so that parents are the authorities for their kids. They're the loving ones who actually know how to live already, and they're older. So as you're looking at what to do all day with your kids, what you do not want to do is try to convince them to do what they need to do. Then that makes them the authority, because then they're only required to do what they feel like doing. If instead you require them to do what is best for them, then you're being the loving authority that's leading the home. So you start out with that. As something that I said many, many times while you guys were growing up is, do you remember it?
Uh-huh.
I care about what you want, but it has very little to do with how I make my decisions. And that's true, especially when they're little. They may not want to eat their vegetables. They may not want to do their math. And I care about that, but it's not going to sway me in my decision to require them to do both. As they get older, their desires and their wants play more and more of a role, but they never become the entire factor. Never do we only do what we want, no matter how old we are. So right. That's I think the first thing when you're starting to homeschool and you're looking at what to do with your kids in the day.
So we talked about training versus teaching last time. Can you just recap a little?
Yeah. So when you are starting out parenting, you are 100% training and you're not teaching at all. So that would be like the child reaches for a stove, you immediately just grab back the hand and maybe smack it and save their hand from getting burnt. You don't sit down and explain heat transfer to them. However, as the child gets older, the training goes downhill and the teaching goes uphill. So by the time somebody's graduated from your parenting, which would have been years ago, it's 100% teaching. So I'm no longer giving rewards or punishments. I'm only talking, teaching, sharing knowledge, trying to convince. And that needs to be very smooth transition. So what you don't want is an 18-year-old who still has very strict rules about exactly what they can wear and punishment if they don't, or exactly what they can watch. And then the next day, they're 19, they can do whatever they want.
Or an 18-year-old who doesn't understand the principles behind the rules.
Right.
Whereas if you have a 2-year-old, they don't need to understand the principles behind the rules.
And you need to be communicating with your kids and teaching them the whole time, but they need to obey first. And then you talk about the why. You don't start by convincing them. That goes back to the old principle. So that's my philosophy of parenting. And again, I got that from Richard Fugate in his gym, What the Bible Says About Child Training. He just went through verses of childhood and compared the different words that God uses. The only thing that God directs to children and commands them to do is to obey. So that is the one thing they absolutely need to learn.
Okay. So how does that apply to homeschooling specifically, or for all of the public schooled kids who are suddenly doing school online? How is that relevant?
It is so exciting, actually, because this is the chance for all of these families to actually work on this and to get the kids more in shape in being able to obey, because you have constant opportunities to practice. I mean, yeah, we're going to talk about how to do math and reading and Bible and that sort of thing, but the real point that you're actually learning first is obedience and authority. And once they know they can trust you, that you love them, that you have their best interest in mind, and that you are going to stand strong and protect them from bad choices as well as from terrible influences that might hurt them, once they have that security, then they have the freedom to grow. And you've got more of a level of obedience to work with during your day of school.
Yeah.
Not that you ever arrive and you have perfect kids. We still don't have perfect kids. Sorry. But nobody does and nobody ever will. But that is the goal. That's what we're working towards. Not perfection, but obedience.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like you covered that concept.
Thanks.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, what about, what can we do to ensure that a kid is really best set up to have a good school day in terms of like their physical needs?
That's perfect. So the first job of a parent, and I think sometimes people think the only job of the parent is to meet the kids' physical needs, but it is on the list. Like, we absolutely have to do those things. So that would be make sure they get adequate sleep. So even in these weird quarantine times, like, they need to go to a regular bedtime and they need to get up at a regular morning time. They need to eat good food. So if you're feeding your kid Lucky Charms for breakfast, like, that's not sin, but it is super hard on their
And we've done it a lot.
We've done it more for dessert. We've never really done it for breakfast except when Dad gets it. Okay, so it's happened. But if that's your regular, you have to know that you're compromising their whole system inside. That's probably, I mean, it's aiming toward obesity and diabetes later, but tomorrow it's aiming toward the kid's going to have a much harder time concentrating and being able to sit still and get anything done because they're on a sugar high. So feeding them good food, and then sleep are also that. Actually drinking enough water. We have a water chart sometimes, and we probably need it all the time. Making sure that they exercise, even though we're inside. There's lots of ways to do that. And then involve them in the cleaning up of the food. So they're not just eating what they want, but it's still exciting to be a part of it and to help cook. It's not as exciting to help clean, but it's absolutely necessary. So they're learning how to meet their own basic needs more right now than usual because there's more of a focus on that. So it's really a good opportunity. The other thing I would say along those exact lines is teaching them to keep themselves and their environment clean. When you have to get out of the house immediately at super early in the morning, it's harder to focus on that. It's just get it done and get going. But when you have a little bit more time, you can work on actually really good habits. Like when we wake up in the morning, let's pull our bedspread up while we're still in bed before we climb out every day or something like that. We go brush our teeth right away. Why do we do that? We can talk about that. Have their own shower schedule, that sort of thing. They can really be involved in those things. So yeah, you got to start with that stuff.
Okay, I want to talk more about how to involve kids in food and chores, but should we save that for later?
Yeah, we're going to do a whole different one on chores and a whole different one on food because there's so much great stuff to talk about. It's so exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot. Okay, can we talk about cleanliness for just a minute?
I guess.
Okay, great. Because I think it's a lot of times it's hard to know what's the priority. Like, do you have to have a spotless house before you can sit down and homeschool?
Oh my goodness, that's
or
such a good question.
Do you have to finish school before you can clean up the clutter?
Okay, so at one point we did try to clean before we started school. And what happened was we would clean until like noon because we were never done. I'd be like, okay, we can almost start, but first, can you go do this? Okay, also I need you to dust that. It went on forever. So what we finally settled on, and this just worked for us, again, that's what we're sharing, stuff that worked for us, is that we cleaned up our dishes by carrying them over, made our beds, and that was about it. We did all the rest of the chores, like the rest of the kitchen cleanup, even recovery from breakfast was done at lunchtime. And the rest of the house was cleaned up in the afternoon, the evening, and then on Saturday. And maybe some people are really good and they can clean everything immediately and then get to school. We just struggle with that because we weren't able to get enough done before we started.
And there's always more. There's always more cleaning.
That's a great thing about cleaning. It's always there for you.
I feel like you did a lot of nighttime cleaning too. Like you would make things at least relatively neat before going to bed if we hadn't done it throughout the day, so that in the morning.
Dad and I's hobby is to kind of clean up, but we really had we had areas and sections, and this might help somebody too, although we are going to focus on it more later, but each kid had an area of the house that they were always responsible for. So maybe Maz would be the entryway. It doesn't matter who put their stuff there or what it is, it's her job to make sure that area is clean all the time. And then sections, we would take our homeschool room, and it was communist, I admit. We would just draw lines, and your triangle is right here, and it doesn't matter whose stuff is there, it doesn't matter who got it out, it's your job to make that area perfect. And we did that because it was so complicated for every kid to remember every single thing that they had gotten out and done the day before. I mean, how are you going to do that? So we just said, clean up everything right here. And that did work for us. That would be more, again, right after we're done with school is when we would get clean. Or actually, when I would read the Bible in the morning, a lot of times people were still finishing their sections. Yeah. So you can incorporate it into your school as well. But yeah, the environment really matters.
Okay. So if your kids understand who the authority is and that they have to obey you, and the house is in relatively clean, organized shape, that's quite the accomplishment.
Yeah.
Like, those are two really hard things that might take years to really get.
Yeah.
So any progress in any of those areas is worth celebrating.
It really is, because those are life skills that every single kid's going to need. It's not a waste of time at all. You're doing the important thing right there. Yeah. Or one of them.
So if we have those things down, the next question is, how do we homeschool kids? Do you make a plan? How does that work? How do you even know where to start?
Okay. So a lot of people actually have a plan given to them by the school, and that's at least a list. Some people have absolutely nothing. And I would say no matter what, you have to have your own plan. Now, I like schedules. Actually, I don't even love schedules. I think they're restrictive and difficult, but I can work with them and they can work for our family. We have to obey them. Some people just have a mental plan. That's fine as long as you have a plan. Some people have a to-do list, and sometimes we do that too. We go back and forth. That's fine too. But what you can't do is just walk into the day with no plan at all. Because what that will end up with is discouragement and disorientation and inefficiency, and you're going to end up being frustrated with the people around you and with what you got accomplished or not. So you have to start out with a plan. And if you don't, how are you going to work around babies and toddlers? They need a plan.
Right. I'm not a schedule person. I don't like schedules at all. I've mostly done them. When she forced me to stick to a schedule, it went well, and I realized that my life was a lot better with structure in it. But now that I'm making my own decisions, it's really hard for me to want to stick to a schedule. So I think for some people, to-do lists are better. Maybe a benefit of that, and also kind of a disadvantage, is that if you have a to-do list, you have choices. Do I want to work first, play first, spend all day getting my 2 hours of schoolwork done, or get it done first thing in the morning and then be free? So I guess it depends on how responsible your kid is.
And it doesn't matter your personality. Every single one of us is constrained by time. C.S. Lewis postulated that in heaven we won't have time, that we won't have this constriction, that we'll be free from that. And I think he's got some pretty strong arguments behind that. But either way, we're stuck with it right now. So one way or another, regardless of your personality, we are under the bonds of time. So we need to have a plan and goals set out before. So I would start with that.
Okay. So this might be too broad of a question, but I think it's worth discussing. How do you know what needs to be accomplished on a daily basis?
Okay, so
Do you start with year-long goals and break it down?
I mean, let's just start with right now. So the most important thing is God. Like, you have to start with the Word of God. So you need to be in it. So I would say for school, the very most important thing would be Bible. So what we've done over the years was I would read to them, maybe while they're finishing cleaning, or maybe while they're coloring what I'm reading, or maybe while they are writing down, taking notes, what I'm reading, whatever that may be. There's Bible. Maybe we are, and we've done a ton of this, memorizing verses. For many years, I got them up at 7:30, and right at 8 o'clock we were singing with motions, and they had to have good attitudes. That was a stretch. But that starting in the Word of God is a must. So choose what you're going to do. You're going to read. You're going to memorize. Right now we're not memorizing the Old Testament. We're reading through the Old Testament chronologically together, which has been really eye-opening. And we just take turns reading one chapter at a time. So that's number one. Number two, you have to do math. I've read studies, and my mom, who's an actual expert in education, has told me for years that really math goes better in the morning for almost everyone, regardless of their learning style or their personality. Math is done better or learned better earlier in the day. Like, that's typically where you're sharper. And again, maybe not everybody, but across the board,
lose focus.
Yeah, it's a good idea to go right from Bible to math, or at least squeeze it toward the beginning. After that, as long as you're reading out loud to your kids, reading really good literature, stuff you like, you've pretty much done everything you have to do. And in fact, if you did only those 3 things every day for a month, you would get incredible results from that. That would be a very, very solid school. If you're reading stuff you love, you're instilling in your kids a love for reading, which is huge, because once they love reading, you've unlocked the door to basically anything, because then they could read books about biology or cooking or horsemanship or theology. Reading is one of the main goals. They can read the word themselves. So after that, I mean, it's all just icing on the cake. But the very cake, which is of course really good nutrition, maybe we should use another analogy there. Anyway, those are the 3 that I would start with for sure.
Okay, so I know you'd have more to say if you were teaching some new homeschool moms how to even choose curriculum or set things up, but we'll save that for later. What about the parents who suddenly are working from home? Their kids are suddenly at home with either no assignments or minimal online assignments, and this might be for a month, might be for 2 weeks, we don't really know.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts for that or advice on what to try to accomplish?
Well, you would try to accomplish what's set out before you, especially if they're turning it in. Would you want me to talk about like how to reward people, how to move people along?
No, just like what you want to accomplish.
The idea to accomplish is to continue to always learn more in math, and that's an exercise in your brain and you're stretching it. Right before that, to learn the Word of God and have that instilled deeper in your heart, then math. And then to learn to decode words, read fluently, and be able to absorb knowledge from that. The goal later would be independent learning, and you can start that really early on. We could talk about that, teaching kids to be independent and help each other.
Yeah, actually that's where I was going to go.
Yeah, we have a question about that. So if you've got multiple kids, that's such a blessing. And if you have a bunch, that's even better. Because what you can do with that and what they can do is learn to help each other and learn to work with each other. So something that was suggested to me years ago that we implemented and then kind of moved around and did our own thing was to pair up older with younger and have teaching times or even just be helpers. So there's 2 different things that I would definitely recommend because it definitely worked for us. On my schedule, because the more kids we had, the more I needed to plan. Sorry, it just got tighter and tighter, but it totally worked. I would put on there times where maybe Madeline was teaching Emmy. Now, I know where Emmy is as far as her development, and right now she needs to be working on the following 10 toys. We'll talk about that later too, but we have our toys organized by level and then put up high. So we have red list, blue list, and green list. Green list being the youngest, so I would say green list time with Madeline. Every single day we have just a list, and Ma would go down the list, and on the first day she would get out the first toy, and she and Vicky would sit in another room and she would play that toy with Vic. So she's actually teaching her something that's valuable to the younger kid. She actually has the chance to be the boss, to be the loving authority, to help her. No, I take that back. Not the authority, because we tell the kids, cooperate with your older sister. We never tell them to obey your older sister, because we want to really delineate that. The child is never another parent to the other children, but they can help them and they can teach them, they can have meaningful time. And I think that really also helps your relationships too, because you got to know each other really well. The main thing it did for me, besides that, was I was free to focus on whoever I needed to focus on. So that would be when I would be actually working on the math with the kid who was struggling, or helping the kid learn phonics, like the very few steps. Things I really need to focus on, I was able to do that because my toddlers or babies were set up, they were safe, they were entertained, and the person with them was as well. So I would definitely recommend that. Some people do really well with the independent time. I think that's very important to start, like maybe 10 minutes alone, 15. That's hard to set up. One of my friends and I were just talking about that, like to keep them completely safe and also entertained for a longer time can be difficult. So if you have a place to do that, where they're completely safe. I'm talking about from like birth. Like they're little, they need to be able to kick around. We call it kicking around for like 10 minutes with nobody helping them. And if they have trouble, we go help them. But they learn to do that as well. Now that's not the super best time to be totally focusing on someone else, because you can, but you're likely to be interrupted. So you just have to keep that in mind. It's not the number one.
So this is bringing us back to the idea of a schedule. Yeah. It's important because you need to know which kid needs your attention when, and when they can go off on their own or in pairs.
Right. If I didn't have a schedule, it could have fallen out that I had one of the big girls parenting everybody else. That would be totally unfair to them. They needed their own education as well.
Although we did do that for that year we were paralyzed.
I didn't have a schedule that year. It was called Sleep All Day. But it was, I had to make that plan, or else it could have gone a lot of bad directions. There's a lot of things that without a plan, I wouldn't have been able to make decisions to avoid. And so I just can't recommend some sort of a plan.
I think a great benefit of having the kids at home or homeschooling or whatever is allowing them to be independent and allowing them to figure out how to help other people. So as soon as you can release your 6, 7, 8, however old kid to be working on their own or productive on their own, that's a huge success, and it frees you up to do other things.
Right.
But it's doubly successful if you can teach that kid to not only be by themselves, but to be helping another younger kid to be by themselves. And I really enjoyed that growing up. I'm the second to oldest, so I had a lot of opportunities to teach and be helpful. And it's so fun. I'm now an art teacher and a piano teacher.
Like legit.
Okay.
She studies those in college. She got scholarships for both, and she's really talented, and we get the benefit of it.
Oh, thanks.
She comes back and teaches our kids art and piano lessons.
But that started from when I was, 7, helping my 5-year-old sister, and there's skills that I am really thankful to have today. I remember we would read all these little kid books, and the one popular theme would be, oh no, I have a new sibling, and my parents aren't paying attention to me anymore.
We always hated those books, and I still hate those. What in the world? You get a free baby. Babies are the best. It's a gift to your family. You get to enjoy them and hold them, take care of them. Yeah. I just totally don't subscribe to the feel sorry for the older siblings thing, and we've never done that. And it's fine to give them gifts too, but not if your purpose is to console them for having to have a baby in the house. I think that's backwards and just does more harm than good.
Yeah. I think I always was really excited to get to help the little kids, and I see that in all of my siblings. Even down to Emmy, the youngest, we try to make sure that she has little kids in her life that she gets to hang out with and be around so that she gets a chance to be that older helper. Yeah. So the more responsibility, the better. It's fun for everybody. It's helpful for you. It trained me for a lot of things that I'm now doing.
And I would say that there is a limit, like I just mentioned before. It needs to be kept within a certain time so that the olders are, again, not running my house.
Right.
They're not becoming the mother. They're working on their own education. That's just a part of it, though. So I would say that.
And I think it's important, and I was talking to somebody else about this recently, that the older kids don't feel responsible for their siblings like a parent would.
Right.
They are helping, and for short periods of time they might be responsible, but I don't think I should ever have been stressed out about what my little siblings were accomplishing as a kid. Right. So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
One other thing that we did, which I would definitely recommend, which won't really apply if you're stuck at home, but helpers and helpies still applies quite a bit. Yeah. We would always pair up as soon as we got to be outnumbered, Josh and I, when we got 3 kids and then more, we would have one of the olders paired with one of the youngers for things like plugging seatbelts, helping shoes get on, helping carry over from the table if they were wobbly, that sort of thing. And when we were out and about, the helper would always be the one with the helpie holding hands. So we didn't lose people. In fact, one of the few times we left somebody is because we overrode the helpy helper system. And Josh and I said, we'll take over this kid because the kid was having trouble going through a cave. So we lifted and carried.
You need to tell us.
Okay. But it didn't work because Josh and I needed that helper. And when the helper was off duty, we struggled. And we it's just nice to have a team. So again, they don't become the parents, but they learn to do stuff like buckle each other's seatbelts and tie each other's shoes, basic things. So I'd recommend both of those.
I think you've also used that as a strategy to work through relational issues between siblings. We would also change roommates every once in a while, depending on who was getting along best and what might help. Yeah. So it's just another thing to
every time they had a room together, they become best friends, and that's great. But then we would see somebody else maybe starting to get left out, so we'd be like, time to change rooms. So then we would change, and then those people could be best friends. So we had a lot of different best friends going on.
You'd think it'd be the opposite, that you would have to split us up because we're not getting along. But if we weren't getting along, that was all the more reason for us to stick it out and figure out what was going on.
And if they're not getting along, that's on me. I have to handle that. I have to address it, and I have to be involved. It got harder and harder as we had more kids to be on the sibling rivalry thing, which was really honestly minimal, but if we get it immediately, like when someone says something slightly rude to the other kid, that's where it stops. You have to address it immediately. And when the other person responds back rudely because you weren't in the room, you need to run in and stop it right there. Okay, stop. Let's talk about what just happened. And then we separate them. I listened to this kid and their whole story. I listened to this kid and their whole story. And almost every single time, they both sinned. But we have to be involved and we have to catch it right then so that we don't have people actually yelling at each other or hitting each other or something. And if we can do that regularly, they have more freedom to be able to be friends. It doesn't mean everybody will be best friends, but that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next question. Tutorial versus classroom learning. What's your input on that?
Okay, so what we have right now is such a huge gift because everybody's getting the tutorial education. My mom is...
And what does that mean?
That means with a tutor. So like more one-on-one or one-on-three sort of an idea. So my mom's a professional educator. She taught in public and private schools, mostly public, for 30 years. And then she homeschooled my brother and my sister all the way through. Then she went back to school, taught again, became a principal, and then retired. So she's done all of it. And in all of her early years, she would talk about any new theory, any new educational theory, like math dots or a new way to learn to read or a new something. They would all look great in their studies as long as they had low teacher-to-student ratio. So you could take a bunch of hoo-ha and apply it to one teacher with one student, and it's going to work. And then they would apply it. Normally they find out, oh, wait, that was a really terrible idea. But what she got from that is, boy, that one-on-one thing really works. And, of course, that plays out. What do? If you're having trouble learning, you get a tutor. So I think we all know that intuitively, that interaction is ideal, and it's best for education. You get the most done, and it speaks directly to the learning style and the struggles and what's going well with each individual child. So what do we have right now? A country full of tutors and students. So it's really actually beautiful and great. When you're not in a classroom, but you're just in a tutorial situation, you no longer have to compete like as a student. You don't have to judge yourself as a failure or be totally prideful as somebody who's ahead of everyone because you're not comparing yourself to anyone else. You don't have to be aiming for things that really are not where you should be aiming, either too low or too high, because you can set your own standards. Your tutor will be setting your own standards for what you need to achieve and what you need to be able to accomplish. And
Heart
seems like,
issues?
oh yeah. So if you're in, even if you have a perfect, godly, amazing teacher and a group of students with a Christ-centered curriculum, the teacher still cannot, no matter how good he or she is, take time to deal with heart issues with each and every student. Because then the teacher would be sacrificing the time of everyone else. It's just impossible given a group situation. And so you'll see, and I'm sure we've all experienced, like the teacher has to settle for outward compliance, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. But in a tutorial situation, in a homeschool situation, when it is the actual parent who is tutoring,
right, then
you can get to the heart issues. Excuse me, we can stop and say, I'm sorry, that was sin. What you just did right now was arguing, and that's not right. God says he hates arguing with parents. You're supposed to obey your parents. What do you have to say about that? Whatever it is, you can talk to it right then. Or if they're throwing a fit, they can get a consequence. If they're whatever it is, you can actually deal with that. Rather than a group situation where most likely the kid's going to get away with and get rewarded
right,
for whatever their manipulative tactics are. And our people had a lot of amazing manipulative tactics. But they were less likely to get away with those when I was the one teaching them because I knew their tricks. And also I had time to deal with each of them because at the most I had 8 students, and really that wasn't very long. Yeah, 8 students, that's a very small classroom.
And I think that distinction you're making isn't specifically classroom versus tutorial as much as it's teacher versus parent.
That's true. That's
the
true.
Responsibility is different, and your ability to know your kid and know your kid's heart is different.
And enforce discipline. Teachers don't have that much leeway, and they shouldn't, but parents have that responsibility.
Yeah. And on that note, I think the priorities for the parent are different. Can you talk about what's more important, getting school done or getting through a couple of sin issues?
Yeah. Parenting always trumps school.
Okay, that's a little surprising. Why?
It's way more important that a kid has a heart that is turned toward God, that a child is self-controlled and has learned that and has learned to obey. That's like number one. Like we've already said, obedience is the number one thing that God tells them. Now, a parent cannot form a child's heart, But we can attempt to, and we can doctor it from the outside, I guess, while God does the actual work on the inside. And that's done by obeying the Lord and being faithful in disciplining and training. That's the same. Training and teaching the child. So if you are choosing between the spelling list for today or dealing with an attitude, it's always dealing with the attitude. And the kid can catch up the spelling, but they cannot catch up getting away with and being rewarded for that attitude. That's it just messes you up a little bit further. We're all by nature sinners, so anytime we feed that, it's going to grow way faster than anything else. So yeah, some days in our school we would have our beautiful schedule of all the amazing things that we were supposed to do that day, and people would start sitting or throwing fits like maybe 5 minutes in, and so most of my day would be dealing with this one, and then they finally turn around and I've got another, and they turn around and another. And at the end of the day, I mean, we covered a third of what I planned, but that's actually so much more valuable of a day than what I had written down, because we're dealing with real stuff. I'm displaying and demonstrating my love for my children and taking the time to do that. Eventually they're going to see. And they haven't been rewarded for doing something bad. I've been able to address it. And negative consequences happen rather than positive. So,
okay. I want to jump down to attention span. And I just wanted to ask, how many hours of school do you think a kid should have each day?
Okay. It's less than you probably think. Like, I went through public school all the way, so I thought, well, a good school day is working on school from 9 to 3:30 or something, 8:30 to 3:30. I actually don't believe that. We do mix it up within that time in a school, but I think it's more ideal to be able to focus for shorter periods of time. So when you're little, we actually kind of thought about this. When you're 4 or 5, like 1 or 2 hours of school, and that's with breaks, changing focus, changing direction, is plenty. Like that's plenty right there. And when you get to 6 or 8 years old, 3 to 4 hours total is a lot of school. That's fine. I mean, I'm just kind of estimating, and I've really only experimented with my own 8, so it's going to differ. But, excuse me, 9 to 12-year-olds, 5 to 6 hours is plenty of school. And in fact, studies have shown, and mostly I've read the results of those, not read the actual studies, but it has shown that you only have so much concentration time possible in your brain. And you can try to go longer, but it just becomes less and less efficient. So basically you're wearing the kid out, you're getting less out of them, they're learning less when you push school that much longer.
Makes sense. That's really kind of comforting.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of schools that we would look into a little bit, or I'd hear of, because I'm not really shopping for private schools, but they would tout their long hours of homework that they offer and how it's so difficult to go to this school, and if you do, you'll have this much work and be that much smarter. I believe that doesn't actually follow. With that much work at night and that much work all day, you're going to turn out less creative. You're going to turn out less able to solve problems, and you're going to learn a little bit slower. So it ends up kind of the same, but I guess more miserable.
And we're going to talk about free time in a minute, but before we get to that, can you talk about general learning principles when it comes to concrete versus abstract?
Yeah. So that's really interesting. That's very helpful, I think. So humans learn first with concrete things. Like you have actual apples in an actual basket, and you eat 2 and you see how many are left. You have concrete actual items that you're learning about. This person does this and the cat does this. You've got a person and a cat in front of you. And then it moves from there to, what does that move to, the word that we use? Symbolic?
Pictorial.
Oh, pictorial. So you would have a picture of apples and a picture of a basket. And maybe this would be in a worksheet or on the board. And you would figure out, oh, if we take out 2 many apples, this many apples would be left over. It goes from there to symbolic, which would be 4 minus 2 equals 2. And that's a progression for math for sure, and actually for many subjects. You want to start with something that's actually manipulative. So you're touching it, and the child is feeling it as well as seeing it, possibly even smelling it. Like they're really getting it with all of their senses. They're experiencing what is changing in the story or in the problem or whatever. And then they need to go to pictures of that, which is why we have like picture books or picture workbooks. And then after that, we go to symbols of it. So that's when you have math books that just have numbers or books that just have words. So the great thing right now is that all of us have the opportunity to use stuff. I'm pretty sure everybody has stuff. You don't have to have a ton, but maybe you have 8 socks. You can be counting those socks and throwing them at each other. If we have 5 socks, but I throw 3 at your face, how many socks do I have left? Like, that's super fun. Or you have tables to set. You've got stories to tell with dolls and puppets. You've got puppets to make out of trash. I mean, no one doesn't have something manipulative to use. And so, yeah, I would encourage everybody who's homeschooling to remember that concept and to try to incorporate as many actual physical items and then pictures of those items with each new concept as possible. It just makes it so much easier for really, I think, every learning style to be able to absorb new information.
So for a 5-year-old, those 2 hours might be a lot less when you realize that a lot of it is just play.
Right.
But with an educational twist.
Yeah.
So a lot of things around the house, like cooking, for example.
Oh, yeah.
You can do so much with that.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot that you can do that aren't
mm-hmm.
just with a book, with a worksheet, with a textbook.
Right. That's totally true. And just doing chores and managing your own time, I mean, all of that is educational. So you're getting a lot more than you think out of just normal life.
Can we talk about reading?
We can. Great. Okay.
Start from the top.
Okay. There's no other way to learn to read except for phonics. So, sorry. You can pick pretty much any phonics program and it'll probably be good. So do phonics because you're actually decoding what the words say. So I never taught you guys ABC. We didn't even sing that song until later at all. So we started out with a, b, b, and k, s, d, e, f, etc. And we would go through those and you guys learned to decode first. That way when you looked at them in order, when we scrunched them together with 3 in a row, you told me what the sounds were and you were automatically reading. So I would recommend that kind of thinking if you're at that point in parenting, if your kids happen to be that age. That's probably a small number of people who are wanting to listen right now, but it'll apply at some point. But yeah, phonics are absolutely the way to go. But the goal with any reading, and we used to pray that all of you guys would become reading machines. That was our prayer.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's in the Bible. Because that is like we talked about earlier, that's the key to every other thing. So when we're teaching kids to read, we're definitely starting with phonics. And then we're going from there to stuff they enjoy. So it's okay. If you've got somebody who's struggling to read, it's always okay to go backwards a little bit in difficulty and give them something that would be fun for them within the bounds of what God likes. Don't give them evil stuff, I don't think, ever. But stuff that God likes, that's fun for them to read, and then they can get the bug, and they can start to see why it's enjoyable. If they're even struggling with that, then you read to them. In fact, either way, you should read to them. Reading to is the best, because they're getting entertained, and they're seeing that you're getting it from these symbols on these papers, and they're connecting that. And if you have really good books and really good stories, then they're enjoying it automatically, and they want to do that later. So reading is the best. We've had some friends that really just, one story was told to us of some friends that the son could not decode. He just could not read. And he was getting older and older, and they were homeschooling, and people are like, what's wrong with you? Why are you homeschooling? You can't even read. And the dad and the mom just kept reading out loud, reading out loud, reading out loud, reading out loud. And it just went on for years. Finally, I think he was like 13, finally learned to read. Yay. Whew. So, okay, we're doing a little better there. Well, he grows up, he graduates, he goes to college, he goes to law school, he's sitting in law school, and the first day he was like listening, and everybody around him is writing fiercely and typing fiercely, and they're like, what are you doing? You're not taking notes. He's like, I'm listening. He listened and auditorially learned and memorized everything, graduated at the top of his class because the guy can memorize and learn from anything that he heard. And so reading, read out loud to them. It doesn't really, we're trying to talk about things that will be across learning styles. And what I'm talking about when I say that is some people are more visual, some people are more auditorial, some people are more, I'm forgetting the word, but manipulative, tactile, thank you. There's different ways that information gets into brains differently, just like we all have different personalities. So what we're trying to talk about is things that would apply to everyone, and reading aloud is one. We have so many good books, but you could look up lists of anything and get books online right now and just have a time every day to read. When our kids were little, we did that for your quiet times. And so I needed to take a break. I needed them to take a break, and we are not good sleepers. I'm not a good sleeper. My mom wasn't. My grandpa wasn't. It goes all the way back. It takes us a long time to fall asleep, and that affects a lot of life. So I couldn't just throw them in bed and expect them to fall asleep. Instead, we would lie down in the living room in different places, and I would read, my favorite was Winnie the Pooh, because it's actually funny. Like the real Winnie the Pooh, not like the little Disney pictures, the real A.A. Milne. And they would, all of them got read to that book at least, but everyone in the room had to either close their eyes or put their eyes somewhere where I couldn't see them, and then I would read. And they liked it enough that I could say, if I see your eyes, I'm going to stop reading. Oh, your eyes are closed again. And then I get right back to it. So that motivated them. And 9 out of 10 times
that
they
was
fell asleep.
such an important part of our childhood. I remember the transition from Winnie the Pooh to Narnia being very traumatic.
It's really hard. That's hard.
We weren't ready for anything with like a plot or maybe suspense. It was too much.
But you had wit. You knew how to be
What
funny.
was my quote? I wish they just would go back through the wardrobe.
I think that people probably should get to plots, not to contradict you.
Probably.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it's important.
You know what? It's also super fun. Like, I really enjoyed those books. Parenting is not this drudgery. It's actually super fun, and that's one example that's easy. So no matter who your kids are, they can sit there and you can read. I hope you can read. If not, we can talk later.
And not very many things work like this. Normally, you eat the vegetables first so that you don't ruin yourself by starting with the sweets.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with reading, you kind of have to catch it. You have to get the hang of it. And so starting with a candy book, that's just fun, really easy to get through, a topic that you like. And you know your kids, you know what's going to interest them, you know what level they're at, and you can find something that they will hopefully enjoy. And then from there, you realize, oh, reading's pretty cool. And when I can read on my own, I don't have to wait for her to read one chapter a night. I can get ahead, I can do it whenever I want, I can take responsibility. And it just opens up, a world of learning and a whole life of loving to read.
You can also read to kids far above their reading level, and they'll be able to understand it more because you're pronouncing, you're speaking, you're adding inflection and expression, and that makes it easier. You can also, if it's not quiet time, you can stop every page and say, okay, what did I say? Like, what is this about? And that sort of thing. That's actually a very important tool used by Charlotte Mason, that sort of thing, like retelling the story. That's the same mental process as writing a paper. All you have to do is ask your kids what just happened. And if they can tell that to you, they're writing, they don't even know it. Their hands don't have to get tired. They're exercising that part of the brain, and they're also absorbing what they're hearing. So, yeah, I can't recommend reading out loud enough.
Okay, let's talk about free time.
Okay.
What does not constitute free time?
Screens. Screens do not constitute free time. That's not free time. I'm not against screens. I don't think they're bad, but why are we using them so much? Like, I don't think that screens should be the go-to, and I think they should be severely limited. And the reason is, if you're being entertained by something, first of all, what is it? What are you learning? It's not all good. Secondly, you're not actually learning to entertain yourself and to think on your own. It's being done for you. So just like your parents used to say TV will rot your brains, they were right. If they didn't say that, they probably should have said that, because I think there's an aspect to that that's true. Now, do we watch screens? Yes. Do we use them? Yes. Absolutely we do. But if it's your go-to, I think that's probably something to work on. That's not what you want. So when we're talking about free time, we're talking about actual free time. So you have to come up with whatever you're doing or whatever you're thinking, and that means it's not being done for you. A lot of people would call that at first boredom, because they don't know what to do with that. But actually, that is what leads to genius. And somebody really smart said that in something that was probably published.
I just finished reading a book by Senator Ben Sasse, and he made the distinction between producing and consuming. So consuming would be screen time,
right.
But producing is coming up with your own game, going outside, playing house, working with your siblings. It's where you're creating the entertainment, you're creating the content, you're not just taking it in.
And we can say that right now, and you can say, okay, we'll do free time tomorrow, and it's going to just be miserable, and let me tell you, that's okay. So when we moved from a teeny apartment to a small house, we actually had a yard, and so you must have been 420, so you were 2, and Abigail was 4, and they did not know how to play outside, because they did not know how to play outside, like they never had one. And so we were trying to get them out there. Finally, we realized they have to just go learn, and it's probably going to be painful. So we talked to them, and we fed them, we took them to the bathroom, we got them wrapped up. It wasn't even cold. And then we gave them a list. Josh made up a list of things they had to do in the backyard. And they were something like, pretend like you're moving across the country from here to there, stir up this mud, and do something with a jump rope. And they had to do this. And we wrote them in wipe-off marker on the sliding glass door. So the Ab, she could read, you couldn't read, but she could read those, and we talked through them. And they stood there, and we were right on the other side. We said, okay, you can't come in until you do this. You got to do them, okay? It'll be fun. It'll be great. And then we shut the door, and they said, and I think they stood and like.
I remember that being the worst. It was it's so comfortable. You can just sit on the couch.
They weren't scared. Yeah, it wasn't like an emotional thing. They just didn't know what they were doing, and finally, it was probably like 20 minutes, but it felt like forever. They finally went and did one thing, and then they grudgingly liked it. And then the second time we put them out, it wasn't easy, but it was okay. Like, you guys didn't just stand there and stare at us miserably. And the third time, they were good. Like, they just needed to learn to be able to do it. So I just want to encourage you, it's not going to be all beautiful if you're not already doing this sort of thing. Also, I do like that list concept. So when they were too little to come up with anything, I had a list. I think I mentioned before, just different things that little people can do that would be on their level. Things like, we talked about playing with sand, or playing with beans, or playing with shaving cream, or whatever. Something that I'm doing with them, we're doing together, that's fun for their level. It's similar when you put them outside. Yeah. So sometimes I would say, okay, you're having outside time, here are some jump ropes. And they could go figure that out. Or
I think the key is...
here are some pioneer clothes. Go be pioneering.
I think the key is initiative, because it's hard. You might know that a board game with the whole family is going to be fun, but no one really wants to start that.
Or learn it.
No one wants to put down their phone and get in, and it's like, it's hard to realize that it's going to be worth it and it's going to be fun if you just check in. But you can decide that for us,
right?
Kind of give us that nudge. And those days were always the best. We had so much fun playing in the forest and in the creek and in the playhouse and just coming up with our own world, our own scenarios, playing house endlessly.
Forever, always, everywhere.
What started as boredom always turned into the most creative, amazing time where we wouldn't even want to come in. It would be hours and hours.
And they really smelled bad when they did. Outdoor kids smell. But again, that's the function of doing what's best for them and not what they already want to do.
Yeah.
And usually, not always, usually they're going to end up wanting to do what's best for them, but I mean, some people...
And we learn after a while, we're like, oh yeah, outside time. This is where we go have fun.
Yeah. So yeah, free time is really, really important, especially right now, like just being together.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like we've covered almost everything that we meant to cover.
Okay.
Just a few more things. Parenting overrides schoolwork, we talked about that. What about realistic goal setting, rewards, charts, systems?
Yeah. Okay, so as you're facing your days right now, and for those of us who get to do this all the time, best career ever, it's really important to make your goals, make your schedule, whatever it's going to be, and then communicate that clearly. So you, let me see what I wrote down here. So you want to put it in front of them somehow, so the kid understands what's expected of them. One thing they used to hate that I would do to them is I'd be like, okay, I want you to do this job, and they'd go do it, and then I'd come back and I'd say, okay, now I want you to do this job. And they'd be like, okay, and they'd go do that job, and I'd be like, great. Now I want you, and it just like went on, and Liddy would say, can you just tell us all of them, and then I'll know, and I'd be like, oh, so it's a little bit harder for me to do that because I have to think ahead. So the same goes with school. Okay, here's what we're going to do today. I need you to get these things done. Or, here's what we're going to do today in this order with these times. Or whatever. Here are the things that you have to accomplish. Needs to be communicated really clearly to the child and the parent. You need to know where you're going. And then there's lots of things you can do to make it more fun. A lot of times just having a checklist, like we would print out their checklist, Josh even wrote us a program for it, but it would have a column for each day and it would have each subject going sideways. So you had one piece of paper for the week, but just checking them off is pretty rewarding. Yeah, and once they get through what they needed to do, they would have more free time. If they were staying on the schedule, they would have free time within that block of time. Either way, they got rewarded for finishing. If you want to be super fun, you could do stickers. They could stick a little sticker on there, but whatever, the child knows where they're going, and they understand what's going to be expected of them, and they can adjust to that, and the parent knows too. You can do super fun things, and we've done all of these things. So you can put a reward right in front of the kid. Like if they're really struggling maybe with attitude about math, I'm going to put 5 M&Ms in front of you, and they are yours, unless you have a bad attitude about a math problem. And if you do, you're going to lose 1. And then it happens right in front. So they're sitting right there on the table. And then this one, I don't know what. Okay, they just lost an M&M. I'm sorry. That was a bad attitude. I want you to have the M&Ms. If you show me an excellent attitude in the next problem, maybe you can get one better. If you just continue on like you're supposed to, you can keep them. That sort of thing is pretty motivating. Or it can be 5 pennies. And if you still have all 5 pennies, you get to go outside for half an hour. Whatever would motivate your child. Putting something right in front of them is a really good idea. Another thing would be like on the wall. So we've had millions of charts on the wall or ladders, and maybe so maybe you have a marker or a paper clip or a clothespin or something, and every time they do something really well, like you just obeyed really well. I asked you to get your math book out and you got that out instantly. I'm going to move you up a rung. And there need to be kind of a lot of rungs for something like that, because you want to be able to reward them for every single one. And then when they get to the top, they get a piece of gum. Stuff like that can be very rewarding, and that's fun for a parent to come up with. Like, I love to think about things. What would my kids really enjoy? What would really motivate them? Another one would be just modeling a love for learning. And that's not a system, and that's not a fun little bribe, which I totally believe in bribes. But just showing how much fun it is to be able to read. Guys, you can go outside and play, and I am going to sit down and read a book. So if you need anything, too bad, or whatever. Yeah, you're still going to help them. But showing that you love it is a way to get them involved. My mom used to sit and she would do desk time, and we would come up, what are you doing? She's like, no, this is not for you, this is just for me. And she would love it. She just enjoy it. And finally we're like, what are you doing? We want to do it. She's like, I'm working on workbooks. And so, we totally fell for that. And I think, but that's real too. Like, she was doing real things. And I think that that's something a parent can do as well.
So with all these charts and fun things to be able to see progress and set goals and achieve it, this isn't just helping you to get done what you need to for the day, but as kids, we felt accomplished, and we felt like we really did something. And when our school was done, free time was beautiful. So days like this really can be fun. Once you've got the whole obedience thing down, and you've got the schedule, and you've learned to follow it.
Right.
Then
Whatever form that might take.
It's just, you can really enjoy learning. You can enjoy teaching. You can enjoy accomplishing things and feeling like you really used your time well.
Yeah, and none of those are guarantees. Like, you might be suffering all day.
Sure.
But as long as you're being faithful to what God wants, you are still accomplishing something valuable.
Right.
And you're pleasing the Lord in doing it. So maybe it won't look pretty, and your kids won't love math, and they won't be best friends that day. But it's still really pleasing to the Lord, and it's still really valuable. And this time at home with our families are such an opportunity to be able to work on those things that actually really please God and really train the kids to have a life that's way more fruitful.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for you today.
We're going to be back next week on Wednesday. We're just going to do this on Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about other topics that we think are super interesting and helpful. And I gave the list last time, and I forgot to bring it this time, but things like food, chores, the beauty of obedience. Actually, we're going to talk about dating. We're going to talk about a lot of things that our families done well, done poorly, help figure out, have some thoughts about. And again, I love looking into other people's lives and into their homes, not in a creepy way. So I hope you enjoy too, looking into our lives, and I hope this has blessed you. Thank you, guys.
And if there's anything you want to talk about, or you have questions about, or suggestions, leave a comment, and then we can get to them in another video.
Sounds perfect. All right. See you next week.
Thank you.